We are ready.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the City of Kaiser Budget Committee meeting for the fiscal year 2019-2020 to order, and it is 6 p.m.
Roll call?
Okay. I was like looking for Tracy over there.
Sorry.
Ron Burson.
Here.
Keith Blair.
Here.
Kathy Clark. Here. Don Clark.
Here.
Kevin Dial.
Here.
Kim Freeman. Here. J.D. Gillis.
Here.
Roland Herrera.
Here.
Dan Kohler.
Here.
Marlene Parsons.
Here.
Laura Reed. Here. Elizabeth Smith. Here. And Jonathan Thompson.
Here.
Perfect. At this time, it is time to elect a budget chair, which is a citizen this year, and a vice chair.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I would like to nominate Von Burson as chair this year.
Second.
That was Jonathan. Any other nominations for chair? Hearing none, nominations are closed. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Entertain a motion for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Laura Reed for vice chair.
Second.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Being none, nominations are closed. All in favor for Laura Reed as vice chair?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So moving on the calendar. So we're looking at the approval of the budget calendar, page 16.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the budget calendar for 2019.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries. Okay. Guarantee you the rest of the items won't go all that fast. Well, a few more, but other than that. So we're looking at the Budget Committee meeting minutes for 18-19. Anybody have any changes to the minutes? Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. So, on to the city manager budget message. City manager, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. And I'm going to start off with, as I always do, directing you to page 3 in your budget document, which is just something fun that I do each year, and that is to find quotes by other people who have thought about democracy over history, and basically just let you know that people have been thinking about democracy for thousands of years. This isn't new to us. We've only been doing it for a couple hundred years, but it's been practiced for much longer than that. And I listed a number of quotes here, but I'm going to read you the ones from Abraham Lincoln just because I thought that they were poignant and amusing. So, as I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. This expresses my idea of democracy. Abraham Lincoln. Ballots are the rightful and peaceful successors to bullets. Abraham Lincoln. And finally, I am a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts and beer. Abraham Lincoln. So he knew what he was talking about.
That sounds like a segue to me.
So page 8, you will find the city manager's budget message. And I am just going to go over that. It's fairly short this year. Honorable Mayor Clark, city councilors, budget committee members, citizens of Kaiser, I am pleased to present the City of Kaiser's annual budget for fiscal year 1920. Overall, the City of Kaiser is in a stable financial position with resources adequate to maintain the existing city services. The city is expecting overall operating revenues to increase by 6% compared to the prior year. Primary revenue increase is associated with property taxes and state highway trust fund revenues. Property taxes are expected to increase 4%, which includes 3% annual increase in assessed values and a 1% increase due to growth. The highway trust fund revenues are expected to increase as a result of the comprehensive transportation funding package that was approved in 2017. The funding package included a 10-cent gas and fuel tax increase and 53% increase in the weight mile tax over a 7-year period. In addition, charges for service are expected to increase as a result of a proposed 4% water rate increase, a proposed 55-cent per ESU stormwater rate increase, and a 2% sewer rate increase. And just to remind you, the City of Salem manages the sewer infrastructure and sets the rates for the regional system, and we simply collect and pass through to them. So we don't have any control over the sewer rate. The rate increases are needed to sustain service levels and fund the capital improvements that are part of our master plans for each of our utilities. The fiscal year 2019-20 operating budget, which includes personal services and materials and services, is expected to increase 3% as compared to fiscal year 2018-19. The increase is primarily attributable to an increase in wages, insurance, and PERS costs. The city anticipates adding an additional public works employee to focus on GIS-related activities. And that is a big chunk of that increase as well. Capital outlay is expected to increase 8% as the city intends to resurface a significant portion of River Road, which you'll hear about in the street fund. I thank the City Council and the Budget Committee for providing helpful policy decisions and creating this balanced budget. The important questions you ask, the request for detail needed to understand and appreciate the city services are greatly appreciated. Thank you. And with that, I send it back to you, Mr. Chair. If I could also, I failed to point this out, but I just wanted to draw your attention to page 4, and this is a copy of the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award that the City of Kaiser received this last year from the Government Finance Officers Association. And what it does is it reflects excellence in budgeting. And our budget is sent out to a bunch of reviewers across the country, and they review the budgets for ease of understanding, accuracy, detail, those kinds of things. And we, for a number of years now, have won this award, and that is almost 100% due to Tim's hard work, because he's excellent at what he does. So anyway, I just want to let you know that. It's sort of one of those, it's like hanging a diploma on the wall, but it's buried in this big document, so I wanted to draw your attention to it. So, anyway, thank you.
I will add to that just a short note. I'm also on the audit committee, and it makes it really easy with the auditors when they come in with the CPA firm that they're pretty complimentary of the finance staff here and the work that they put out, and there's never any issues that come about. I know, Kim, you're there too. It actually kind of feels guilty to be on that committee because it's in and out so darn fast. So, but I appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, every year when they leave, I always ask Tim, is it an orange jumpsuit level year? Somebody going to prison this year? Nope.
No.
Not again, so. Every year the same answer. It's
Quick
nice.
audit meetings are good audit meetings.
That's right.
Okay, so we'll move on to public testimony. Looks like we have a 5-minute limit per person. So there's only 3 people on here. So do we really need the timer?
No,
Okay.
I don't know how to do it, so.
Okay, good. So if we think it's over 5 minutes, we may raise your hand or something
We'll
like
just use our
that, but,
Yep, there you go, Chris has said it's fine.
so,
No, it's right here.
so with only 3 people, we'll try to, anyway, try to keep your comments to 5 minutes time so that we don't have to work the technology around here. Appreciate it. So, I'm gonna say Robin Barnum?
Barney.
Barney from the Cultural Center. Thank you. If you'd introduce yourself for the record, please, because I did such a poor job.
Hi there. Okay. Thanks. Hi. Thank you for the opportunity for the Heritage Center to come forward to the Budget Committee to inform you of all of the great changes that have taken place over at what is called currently the Kaiser Heritage Center. And in about 30 seconds, it's going to be the Kaiser Cultural Center. And the reason for that is we had a huge change in June. We brought in Homegrown Theater that took over our great room. They have been a wonderful partner. All of the tenants and there's just an air of excitement in the air over there. They're all generated and energized and working together in a fashion which you really haven't seen before, because you've got 4 of Kaiser's cultural nonprofits housed in the same place. You have the Kaiser Community Library, you have the Kaiser Museum, you have Enid Joy Gallery, and now you have your Homegrown Theater. And some of the ways that this has happened is started with the Kaiser Art Gallery, the Enid Joy Art Gallery. When the theater has their openings in their theaters, the art gallery is open before the play, during intermission, and then afterwards. They've had an increase in sales that they normally would not see had the theater not been there. The museum has seen an increase in numbers from those nights, people coming down to visit, which again, we wouldn't have that exposure had we not had them move in and become partners. We continue to partner and collaborate among the tenants. Planning always is continuing. In this past year, we were very frugal with the funds that the city gave to us so generously. We planned and we prioritized and scrutinized what we had, the funds that we had. We were able to add some nice amenities to that building, security lighting for the outside, which has almost eliminated all of our homeless activity over there, camping out around the buildings, no more bonfires in the bushes, which is always exciting. We have been able to upgrade, do some repairs on the lift, do some upgrading on our firing system, and also, with the help of Bill Lawyer, upgrade our decorative light posts out front, which, again, we would not have had the opportunity to do without the funds that you so generously gave us. Because of the city funding, we are also looking at new software and computers for the Kaiser Museum. We need to make the documents, the picture, and the history that we hold very dearly, very accessible to the citizens, to anybody who comes in to use it. It's got to be user-friendly. And the foundation has come together, and at our last meeting we've decided that perhaps bringing someone in to lend us a hand to make that museum better. Where can we improve? What can we eliminate? What should we be storing? What kind of activities and exhibits should we have there? Right now there's a lot of partnering with those exhibits that are taking place in the museum with the library. During the Star Wars exhibit, they were able to have, okay, lost it. They were also able to contribute some Star Wars exhibits within the library itself also. Shoot. Okay. Along with looking for a curator for the museum to help us out, we're also looking at other ways that we can multiply our dollars that you have provided to us so that we can do bigger and better things. What those are right now, we haven't come to a conclusion, but again, we're always prioritizing and being as frugal as we possibly can. I have I've reached out to our tenants and asked them how they felt about the collaboration and what's going on and the contributions. And this is just a couple of things that they were able to say. The contribution of the Kaiser Cultural Center has allowed the Art Association to have consistent rent, which allows nonprofit and all volunteers to the staff keep their rates in their art classes and their programs and their events at a reasonable rate so they can go ahead and provide that with the community, because most of their people are children and seniors on a fixed income. So if they can fix those prices within that without having to pay for overhead, more for the community to enjoy there. The Kaiser Library, the community library, for example, the Art Association has made their classroom available to the library, also to the foundation directors to have our meetings. The library has had their Lego club meetings in there and events. And they are appreciative. The Homegrown Theater also provided us space for our Santa event and for our holiday recognition. And to see just what a great event and exposure that the theater has given to us. The theater has hosted a movie day for McNary LGB Club with more events that they're going to follow. The library book club is coordinating with the theater a production of Who Am I this time with Kurt Vonnegut, and its members club will receive discount tickets. So there's a lot of great things going on and a lot of collaboration, and we're just beginning. And we want to let you know that the biggest value for the taxpayers is the tremendous cost savings to operate these organizations is proved by all of our volunteers that we had all in one location on Sunday. There must have been 70 of them there. And all of their circumstances for our community is to make, they're there to make our community a winner and to access all things that are cultural all in one place. And I thank you again very much for this opportunity. And if I forgot anything, Linda, Lori, or Lyndon will speak up. My 3 L's. Did I miss anything, ladies?
Lori,
You have to
microphone.
be at the microphone, hon.
She knows how to.
You contribute $20,000 to this operation. It's what you contributed last year. Prior to that, you were contributing $10,000, taxpayer dollars, to maintain the library. The library doesn't have a consistent source of funding. The museum doesn't have a consistent source of funding. Theater has a consistent source of funding, and so does the Art Association. So it's a partnership with the city of Kaiser. You pay for half and we pay for half, and everybody wins. Mostly, the people that win are seniors and children, and those programs are continually being expanded. But the thing that is unanticipated, at least wise for me, and our partners could speak to this too, was the collaboration that is taking place and how we reach out to one another to make it all work together. It's so much more than it was when we were 4 separate entities all trying to scramble to figure out how are we going to be able to stay in this building. Additionally, we have, that's one of the only historic buildings that we have in Kaiser. We love that building, and so we want to provide it with tender, loving care. Not only do we use it as a place to run the nonprofits, but we look at that as our heritage, and we want to take care of it. You've got 70-plus volunteers that do that through the 4 entities. Everybody's committed to it. You couldn't have a better deal for taxpayers and a more reasonable way to maintain the building, but also make sure that all 4 of these nonprofits move forward for our community.
Questions? Mayor Clark.
Thank you. I have the pleasure of sitting on the board of directors for the Kaiser Heritage Foundation representing the city. And I do want to echo what our former mayor, Lori Christopher, said, that we are getting tremendous value. Being an event center is tough, really tough on a facility. Just ask Tracy what a beating our community center takes. We love it to pieces, but it takes a beating. Well, when you're 113, like our Heritage Center building is, that's pretty tough. And transitioning from an event center over into a theater, Plus, getting so many more people in the building now than had ever been there before is really easing up on some of the wear and tear of the building, but also increasing the community engagement of every organization in that building. So I've been able to observe this through the board meetings, and I also want to affirm what was said about the budgets. Very, very responsible, very, very cautious with every dollar to make sure that the maximum value is obtained, but also that the building is taken care of. They're not chincing on that, just being responsible.
Thank you. I have a question, Chris. Is this $20,000 in the budget? Because I don't see it on this
It is.
piece of paper here. Is that correct?
It is correct, it is in the budget. We've taken it off of the outside budget request because we do have a unique relationship with them since their building sits on city property.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, David Dempster. Welcome back, good to see you.
Yeah, different seat. I'm here representing the traffic safety, I have to think about this a minute, traffic safety, bikeways, pedestrian, and I don't know if there's another word, safety, in there again, committee. Anyway, we voted to send someone here to inform some of you. I think, like the city council probably already has this information, but the committee spends a lot of time discussing problems. Last year, we applied for a Safe Routes to School grant, which we didn't get. But the committee voted to recommend that the city install a sidewalk or bike path on Delight Street from Chemawa to the school property. We're letting you know this, what we think should be done. We're not quite clear where I'm assuming the city council knows about it, but we're making this kind of, at least a formal recommendation. This is going to be really short because the second one was we're recommending that there are improvements be made to Ridge Road all along the Kaiser Little League park. I suggest some Saturday this summer you try and drive through there. We're not sure all of the things that need to be done. Some of the work may have already been done, but the pavement needs to be maintained at least. And although there's not a bike path, there's a tremendous amount of new biking up there, and apparently a lot of traffic from the new developments that have occurred. So that was a recommendation that be maintained and improved. That's what we're here to say. So, I don't know if everybody's familiar with the Safe Routes to School program. Applied for a grant, but we didn't get it. Apparently, there's a lot needier cities than Kaiser.
A lot of competition across the state for those grants.
Right, and it tended to go to larger cities.
Any questions? Did you want to talk, Mr. Lawyer, about the Light Street?
Delight Street is in next year's budget. That is a 10-foot wide asphalt pathway from Chemawa Road North to Dearborn, not to the school property yet. In talking with school district staff, they have a plan to add a sidewalk on their property. I understand to the north property line as part of their bond project at Cummings School. They didn't know exactly where they were going to put it yet. They hadn't gotten that far in their design and planning. And they indicated to me when we talked that when they know that, and if our pathway is done or under construction, they would finish the path from the school property to Dearborn, which is the length of one property, or the depth of one property, about 100 feet. And if for some reason that doesn't come through, then I'll find a way to make that connection when we know where the school district's sidewalk is going to be on their property.
Thank you.
And the Safe Routes to School, we applied actually for 2 grants, one for the Delight Street project and one for some work around Kennedy Elementary School. We weren't successful on either one of those. There was, I think, $16 million allocated for funding across the state, and there was like $16 million worth of applications out there. It wasn't earmarked for larger cities. It was really safety-related things, and the projects that were awarded funding were, I'm going to just pick a random street, like Division Street in Portland. Really high volume traffic, wide streets that had much more significant safety concerns than the two projects we brought forward. I'll keep an eye on that as it moves, as each cycle comes up, and see if we can put together something to apply for in the future. But based on what I know today, pretty unlikely we're going to score very well for any of our projects until a lot of the other things statewide on higher safety issues are taken care of. So.
Until somebody gets hit?
Not necessarily somebody gets hit, but again, the projects, and I went through the list pretty good, and I mean, I didn't know everything that was awarded, but some of the ones that I did recognize, I think there was one in Salem on Liberty Street South or something like that. Clearly much higher volume roadways than what we were working with, so.
Mayor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, as a follow-up, the Salem-Keizer Area Transportation Study, our metropolitan planning organization is working on an application for a grant to fund a school district-wide coordinator for safe routes to school. So that would bring somebody on staff who would be focusing on these projects specifically, which would be a big help, not just for the Keizer schools, but all of our Salem-Keizer schools.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much. Jonathan Thompson.
If you'll allow me to switch hats here for a moment. Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, members of the committee, my name is Jonathan Thompson. I live here in Keizer, and I am President-elect of the Keizer Chamber of Commerce. I'm here in support of our budget request, which is included in your packet in the other requests. Most of our team is currently up to their eyeballs in Keizer Fest, so you all drew the short straw and you get me. So we're very pleased to see the $8,500 from last year included in the recommended budget, and we thank city staff for that. And you also have our request in front of you, so I won't belabor it. But in addition to the funds in the recommended budget, we are requesting an additional $6,500 in TOT funds for the new Visitor Center and an additional $275 for the advertisement in the annual Keizer Lifestyle Directory. This increase will purchase a full-page ad this year. As you've probably seen, the new Visitor Center is open on River Road, and the window signs make it hard to miss. And it's also now staffed during business hours. We added an additional FTE this year, bringing it to 3 in that office. If our request is fully funded, it will cover less than half of one of the new FTE, not to mention the 2 current FTEs already at work. So chamber members have already made a significant investment in the new Visitor Center. The Christmas tree lighting ceremony is not included in our request. We continue to provide this event for the community and for folks outside of the community. It costs us money each year, but we think it's well worth it. We have it as Keizer Fest with all the people it brings to town. Tourism related. We have 2 new partners this year. We are promoting the Salem Bike Club's ride during Keizer Fest, and they are helping us with detour signage, bike detour signage, and bike racks this year. And we've also expanded our partnership with McNary. Their AVID program will be very involved in the parade, and their new contemporary music project will be entertaining Keizer Fest guests, and we hope to be able to raise some money to help them with the nut they need to crack there. We've also been working on building additional relationships with other local schools. We are part of the upcoming Claggett Creek Middle School Resource Fair, and we have worked with Kennedy Elementary on some t-shirts they needed for an event. I could go on, but I know too well what it's like to sit up there late into the night. So in closing, up until about 2011, the Visitor Center received about 20% of the TOT dollars. While this request will not get us back there, it's a great step in the right direction, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
So this funding will keep the center open during business hours, but what about like on a Saturday morning? Because it's busy over there and people are stopping all the time.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Parsons, that's something we can look into. We haven't yet, but that's definitely something that we can look into.
And have they thought about volunteers or somebody just giving 3 hours up of their time on a Saturday, or?
Yes, that is something we are actively looking at now that we have the space for it. When we had the space up at Kaiser Station, it was a little tight to put any volunteers in there. So now that we have the space, that is something we are actively looking at.
Okay, because I think it's important that you guys now have these operating hours where people can come in, you know, on, not just on a Saturday, but during the week. And, because I know sometimes it's closed, they're all gone.
Yep.
And that's probably, we want it to be open, so.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thanks.
Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to commend the chamber. The move from Kaiser Station to River Road, I think, was a great thing. It was a bold move, and I think it was very positive for Kaiser. Thank you.
All right.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Mr.
Oh,
Chair?
I'm sorry.
So this is a discussion that we can take up then when we're looking at the fund under which this would be, so probably the community center fund, because we are looking at TLT.
Likely it'll be Thursday night when we look at both the general fund and the community center fund.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right. Is there anybody else that wanted to speak that didn't sign up? Tracy, I'll leave that here for you. All right. Okay, let's move on to budget presentations and deliberation. Start off on page 95, Administrative Services Fund. I'm assuming somebody from the right-hand side to my right has got this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right. To my right.
Well, thank you, Budget Committee. First off, I'd like to say thank you for all of you coming out. It is quite a commitment to spend 2 nights this week with us for 3 hours apiece. So again, thank you for your investment into the city of Kaiser. I do have a few notes here before we get going on administrative kind of stuff. We do have some new faces here. So Oregon has a very strict municipal budgeting law, and we're required to abide by those laws. They're really to promote transparency through notice requirements, through public involvement. A budget for a city is much different than, say, a budget for a business or for your own personal budget. For the city, it's really about, the emphasis is on the ability to provide services into the future. For a corporation, there's much more emphasis on the bottom line, the current income, profitability. If we were to focus on profitability, that would be great until the point we weren't able to keep our water system running. We could save a lot of money through the years by not investing into the infrastructure, but we won't be able to provide services into the future. With a personal budget, it's kind of a mix between the short-term needs and the long-term goals. So for a city, we very much have a long-term emphasis requiring us to focus on the ability to provide services. As you look at the budget, we're going to see several different funds. Each fund is a standalone entity. We can't take funds from one fund, we can't take money from one fund and use it to pay the expenses of another fund. A lot of these funds have revenues that are statutorily required to be spent on certain things. We have 2 funds, the Administrative Services Fund and the General Fund, that are kind of a conglomerate of a bunch of different departments. When the time comes for those 2 funds, we can go through all the different departments first and then take a vote on the fund itself. For the other ones, the Public Works type of funds that are not a conglomerate of multiple departments, we can take a vote on each fund as we go through it. Keep in mind, as we go along, we will take a vote. You can come back at the end before we adopt the total budget and make any amendments or changes. So you have 2 opportunities really to discuss each of the funds if you so choose. Also, we do budget to the nearest $100. In some situations where it's a small account with a small balance, $100 is going to give you a fairly high percentage change from the previous year. It's just because it's such a small dollar amount, so don't get too excited on me, please. Also, in general, we budget each line item to be kind of a reasonable amount of what we've experienced in the past. Every year, we do anticipate coming in under budget, and in fact, we're required to come in under budget. Oregon has very strict laws about spending more than your appropriations. In the event we do overspend, we have to come back with a formal plan to the City Council, have the City Council adopt this plan on how we're not going to overspend in the future, and then we have to submit that plan to the state. So there are some fairly strict requirements, plus there's some fiduciary liability for myself and other members of the city if we do go over budget.
Remember I mentioned orange jumpsuit level event.
It would be bad. It would be bad. So in general, typical with previous years, in our general fund, we do budget more in expenses than we have in current resources, and we do anticipate that each year we're going to come in under budget. So it's a constant, yes, we think this is a reasonable amount by each account, but we do realize that we're going to have to come in under budget significantly within the general fund and with all of our funds, just to continue to be able to provide services into the future. With respect to making changes to the budget, as we get to the outside budget requests, they're fairly small dollars, except for the chamber increase in their request of $6,500. If we do decide to adopt those changes, we'll end up taking it out of ending fund balance. You don't need to go looking for places where we can cut. We can just simply adopt those and reduce the ending fund balance, both in the general fund and also in the community center fund. So with that, there's a few things that you'll see throughout all of the budgets. Specifically, if you want to turn to page 67, as a city, the majority of our expenses really are payroll related. So this is kind of a summary of the employee benefits. And like we talked about at the long-range planning meeting, a lot of the big drivers are the PERS retirement costs, pensions, and then also insurance. So you'll see throughout the budgets, the range for insurance will be anywhere from about 7 to 10%, depending on the budget. For retirement, it'll be anywhere between about 10 and 17%, that range. So it's going to be a little bit of variation depending on what type of employees within each of the different budgets. So obviously the Tier 1, Tier 2 versus the OPSERT versus people who don't participate in PERS at all, that's going to have a different mix for what we have going on here. So just keep that in mind. Also with respect to retirement pensions, there was an increase with the Kaiser Police Association, so you'll see some of the increase when we get to that fund. The city historically had been contributing 1% of their base salary to a retirement health savings account. This account was set up so that they would have a pool of funds for when they retire, because police are able to retire much earlier than the rest of us folks. So this will give them a pool of money that they can use for medical expenses, but from the time that they retire until they're eligible for Medicare. We went from 1% to 2% based off of the collective bargaining agreement. So you'll see that little bit of a pickup when we get to the police budget. With respect to increases in wages, you'll see a 2.5% increase for non-represented and for also those subject to the Kaiser Police Association collective bargaining agreement. For those public works employees with LIUNA 737, I think that's what they're called. And I'll have to throw a dollar in because I don't know what the acronym's for. They'll have a 3% increase, and that again is based off of their collective bargaining agreement. So with that, I would say let's turn to tab 6, and that is page 95. And feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions if you have any that are lingering out there. To start off with the budget deliberations, we're going to start with the Administrative Services Fund. This is the fund that's the overriding, I guess, executive team. The department head group most of the department heads are part of this, but it includes a lot of the central administrative type of services. Overall, the budget is expected to increase about 4% for the year. You'll see that total personnel services is about 5.4% increase. And again, a large part of that is the insurance, and the pension retirement costs. With respect to the materials and services, we're actually going down 2.4%, and a lot of that is IT related. We just had some big projects that we did this year that are not carrying into the next year. So that's why you'll see the decline there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to each department head to talk about their respective areas. So at this point, page 97, we can look at the city manager's budget. And again, for the administrative services, we don't have to take a vote until we get to the very end of all the administrative services departments. City manager.
Thank you, Tim. And Mr. Chair and council members, I just wanted to recall a story that was brought to mind when Chair Burson said, "Until some kid gets hit." When I was in Kansas as a young city manager, I remember having a discussion with a Kansas Department of Transportation engineer, trying to talk them into lowering the speed limit coming into town at a new intersection that was created because we had a new subdivision that came in. And there was sort of a hill that kind of came down, and then our new intersection teed in about halfway down that hill, and it was difficult to see until you crested over that hill. We were just trying to get them to lower the speed limit from 75 down to 55, right, coming in there. And I remember doing the whole song and dance with this fellow and asking him, how many kids have to die at this intersection before you guys are going to lower the speed limit? And he looked me straight in the eyes and said, 5. And that's when I learned about bureaucracy. It was that moment when I learned what it meant. So anyway, with that, on to yeah, I was like, yeah, well, great. As long, now we know, I guess we'll get working on that. So I was actually stunned. My budget is status quo. You'll see the 2.5% cost of living increase, PERS, et cetera, but no increases in any other line item. I'd be happy to take any questions.
This probably will, good a time as any to ask it, but it goes for all the budgets. I'm hearing rumors last night that a deal was struck at the Capitol to go home, and part of that deal includes a paid family leave bill that will have an employer contribution. I mean, I'm hearing it's anywhere between 1/3% and 2/3%, depending on what number they settle on. But is that going to, something like that going to, I mean, do we have enough cushion in these budgets that we have to absorb that? We can? I mean, I know it's a huge unknown at this point, but.
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay, fair enough.
Honestly, I mean, our budget's very tight, so it would be difficult to absorb an additional 1% of payroll as a brand-new unfunded mandate.
Okay. So the details are obviously yet to be worked out, and maybe public employers won't be included, but I doubt it at this point, so.
Thanks for the good news.
Hey, I'm here to serve.
Yes, I am kind of turning white right now, so I don't, we would have to come back and readdress a few things. It may end up meaning slowing down on, within our utility funds, slowing down capital improvements to be able to absorb some of that. General fund, it would be a struggle. It's, the theme that we're really going with anything that impacts the general fund is how can we maintain what we have. So that's kind of where we're at, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Other questions for the city manager? You guys are being way too easy on the city manager. So I have a question.
This is your time to shine, Ron. Yeah.
Well, and I'm actually going to do the opposite here because I'm actually looking, Chris, at this meetings, travel, and training, and it seems to cover a lot, but I guess I haven't paid attention to it in the past, but this seems like a small amount for a person in your position with, the amount of meetings and trainings that are around the state and the new things that are brought in by the state from anywhere from, just like the stuff they're talking about with PERS and different things. And I was looking at some of the other heads of departments, and you're all hovering about between $4,000 and $6,000. It seems awful low for folks in your positions. I mean, is that something you guys have talked about, or Are you able to borrow from, say, Michelle or something, if you need to go someplace good?
No, these are based on actual costs, and so I basically go to 3 conferences a year, and this is roughly what it costs to go there. In terms of actual travel costs, I absorb most of those. The city gives me a car allowance, which we agreed to on my first year of employment, and we've kept it there, and I've found that to be adequate, and so I don't charge for mileage or anything like that. So, I'm able to go to most things in-state very reasonably. I have one national conference, which is always somewhere lovely like Philadelphia or, somewhere, or, yeah, I guess, yeah, it is actually. Nashville's coming up. But everything else is fairly local, so I'm able to get my 40 CEUs a year that way. And so those are actual costs.
I have something to say. I have something to say, not related, but a couple people watching from home can't hear us at all. At all. So we really need to get into the microphone, please. I'm getting
Okay.
messages they can't hear anything. So if we could just get a little closer like this, whether we want to or not, let's get sweet and kiss it.
Okay. And I have a bit of a raspy, I'm catching something right now, so I'm not sounding very good, so.
If you can leave then. Councilor Rare.
Thank you, Chairman Burson. One of the things that's one of the things I've actually had discussions with our mayor about, because in all the training that I've gone to, they encourage and really push the training, and I believe we should maximize all of our training for all heads, because I think it benefits the city, and I have directly benefited, and the city has directly benefited from my traveling, from my training, in terms of expanding our. So I'm a big fan, and in fact, I've even brought it to the mayor's attention if we couldn't expand on that, because I want to make sure that we get the adequate training, especially, I mean, it doesn't mean only employees, I mean the volunteers too, I mean us as counselors, because I see stuff and I go, nah, I probably shouldn't because the city can't afford it. But I really believe that if training's available that would help the city in the long, I really believe that we should be able to accommodate that. And I think in the long run, the city wins. So that's one thing I'd push for, but that's here down the road, I guess.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, let's move on.
City Attorney.
Thank you, Chris, and Budget Committee. As Chris had mentioned, my budget is similar. It's basically a status quo. I've shifted some money in the materials in travel and training into the legal services contracts, as I anticipate using a little more outside counsel for some smaller projects. Continue to get a little behind on the projects in terms of things I have to cover. So I made a shift there, if you can see that down in lines 20 and 22 or 21. Other than that, it's pretty much a status quo budget, and be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Mayor Clark.
Thank you. And during our goal setting, one of the things we did discuss was workload, because currently our legal department is 2 people, Shannon and who's extremely talented and absolutely cannot do without legal staff, Tammy Harms. So when we start looking at our ability to continue to carry out the work necessary, this is one of the things that I know that I'm going to be wanting to look at is where we contract out, where that starts to tip the scales on bringing in-house is more cost-effective. That was how we did the analysis many years ago when Shannon was on contract versus then bringing into city staff. So I think it's important just to know that this is something that we are watching to see when we can get a better value by bringing somebody on staff rather than by contracting. And also not burning out 2 very valuable people.
So I have a question. I don't know if it's for Shannon or for Tim, but this 6,500, is that all the legal contracts that we're looking for the entire city, including labor or anything else?
It does not include the labor attorney, and there is an additional $10,000 in a separate, help me, Tim?
There's an extra $10,000 in the general fund.
That's not directly under my department, so to speak, but yeah.
So we still got a ways to go because, I mean, 6,500 and 10,000 and 16.5, so before we actually get to that tipping point that we may need another attorney in the town.
Well, this is not the need, this is what we can afford to allocate. The need would be 3 or 4 or 5 times this easily. But we just simply, we don't have the funding to do it. Shannon and I have talked about that. And Tim laughs at us when we talk to him about it, and then we move on, so.
All right. Other questions? Councilor Rara.
Chairman Burson, is there something that we are leaving out that we should be including that we can't afford? That you think that's really vital to help the city? Or that's kind of getting from-
Throughout the entire budget or just my department?
Your department.
I think if you ask the department heads and city manager, there's a lot of things that probably we're pretty skinny on in terms of the budget. Since we're on my budget, I mean, I think the department heads can tell you that a lot of projects get put to the side for too long. There's different things that take precedence and that we have to do on a very quick basis, and there's other things that can wait, and some of those things that can wait end up waiting a really long time that we, can get to. There's several ordinance updates that we've had calendared that would keep getting pushed forward. One of the ones is a civil infraction ordinance, which is way out of date. It's kind of a major project to get to. It's one of the things that doesn't have to be done, so it keeps getting pushed off. So, it's hard to prioritize some of those things. But as Chris said, that's it really the tipping point is the question of what service level we're going to have internally, and so that's a question I don't think for this budget, unless some additional funds fall out of the sky, but is, as Mayor Clark indicated, in the near future probably should be discussed more fully.
Boy, thanks for answering that way. Appreciate it.
Other questions? All right, let's move on.
City Recorder's Department, Tracy.
Thank you. This budget is status quo, and this covers myself and the Deputy City Recorder. And the one line item we really have is our travel and training, and this covers for us to attend conferences to continue our education. Questions?
I will mention that both Tracy and Debbie are actively involved in both the state association, and Tracy made the rounds for all the chairs of the National Association for City Recorders, and so they're really well plugged in, and that has served us incredibly well.
And I thank you for those funds to do that.
Questions? All right, Human Resources Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm trying to eat the mic. My budget is also status quo, and in respect to the question that came up regarding meetings, travel, and training, I would point out that our line item for that includes 2 people, myself and the HR generalist, both who have certification requirements and a number of trainings that we need to attend. But it also includes LGPI, the Local Government Personnel Institute fee for the city, which is $1,701. So that line item is not quite as high as it appears to be. And then there was a small reduction in the safety and wellness line item, and that's simply a representation of we didn't have to buy AED batteries this coming year. Yes. Yay. And that's it for my budget. I would like to point out, somewhat connected, on all of the budgets, when you look at the workers' compensation line and you see a 0, I am very happy to mention, we had a meeting with our insurance reps just yesterday, and we got a summary of our 10-year alternative plan performance for being in the workers' comp alternative plan. And what that means is we don't pay a set fee every year. We kind of take a chance on what our experience is going to be. Our experience mod for the coming year is .71, which means that we're 29% less expensive than the average for the whole state. And we have saved $665,735 in the last 10 years being on the retro plan. Just wanted to share that.
Questions? Mayor?
Thank you. With a staff of 2 and a growing staff for the city, it's a similar question, but are there means by which the ability to provide level of service can be enhanced either through personnel or, I know at the state where, I spend the other half of my life, they've been doing upgrades in systems like human resources management systems, et cetera. Is that something in our future to manage the increased workload?
We have had a new HRIS system on the budget want list for a number of years. We do not currently have one. We manage everything through Excel spreadsheets and doing everything by hand. So yes, that would be very helpful, but right now we can't afford it.
But when we start doing our long-range planning, and again, that's going to go back to that
Yes.
staffing, the staffing models to understand what those costs are. So that might be helpful to help us know not only what our status quo is, but what level of service we might be able to discuss.
I have mentioned to the department director team, as we've talked about staffing, that the HR department could probably hold off on adding staff simply by implementing an HRIS, and it would buy us a few more years. And we would be able to improve our service delivery by not spending as much time with manual processes.
And HRIS systems also don't collect PERS. Just saying. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. No more four-letter words.
Not a word, it's an acronym.
I'm a PERS person too, so.
By the-
Councilor Freeman.
Okay. I was going to mention, I'm sorry, LIUNA stands for Labor's International Union of North America.
Yeah, no acronyms anymore. Yeah, there you go, so.
So I just really have a comment, not a question. And it's really for some of our new budget committee and as well as our community. I have the privilege to sit on the Personnel Policy Committee as a council person, and our staff of 2 in the HR department do amazing things as far as wellness for our city staff. I can say I wish I worked here. So they do like recipe planning. They have drinking water, I should probably clarify, right? Water, drinking, they hand out water bottles. They have safety bags. They do a lot of this with money that they get from our insurance provider. So this isn't city money, but they do amazing things for our staff and trying to encourage wellness, whether that's drinking water, that's walking, eating healthy, trying new foods that you may not want to try, or finding things that are prepackaged that are really healthy for you. So when you see wellness and things like that, I think that as a city, we're really trying to make sure our employees are healthy all the way around, and I just kudos to both of them for the things they do. So I just want to share that.
I appreciate that. So I think real quick, we ought to, 'cause I think we forget there are new people on here, but what we're actually doing here, and like our responsibility as the budget committee is we're looking at these budgets, and if you have questions about numbers that are in there, that they're here to answer those questions, why those numbers are here. And I know they have a favorite word, which I don't think as chair I have the authority to get rid of, but the status quo. Can we come up with something other than that? That, same as, I don't care what it is, but anyway, I mean, that's really our job, is to ask these questions. And we don't have a lot of questions for folks that have been here because we're not seeing anything yet, but throughout the process, there's bigger things to come. And so our job is to ask the questions to find out why the number is what it is. So,
Just don't be shy, is what you're saying.
yeah, don't be shy. Don't let us.
Okay, so Jonathan wants to talk now then.
Go ahead.
What does this HRIS system cost? I don't think Tim's going to let me have dinner tomorrow.
I'm surprised he doesn't know where we started.
Thursday.
Well, in response to the long-range planning meeting, when the question was asked, so if we had all the money in the world, what would we start doing? This is the beginning of the list. So HRIS system is at the top of the list right now, and it's about $15,000 for the initial startup. And then there's an ongoing impact of about $3,000 a year. Of that $15,000 initial startup, about $10,000 of it would be general fund costs.
Other questions, comments? All right, let's move on.
Tim?
Finance.
The finance non-departmental budget, this covers 4 employees for the city. There's myself, 2 accounting technicians, and the administrative assistant who sits at the front desk. This budget looks very similar to previous years. You'll see the impact of see how I did that? You see the impacts of the pensions and the health insurance costs. One of the things you'll see under the materials and services, during 2018-19, we had budgeted to do a review of our 457 accounts, do a fiduciary type of review to basically go out and compare them to other plans out, to make sure we're getting the best deal for our dollar. We've not been able to move that one forward, so we're going to be pushing that to next year to try to accomplish it then. With that, if there's any questions.
Councilor Freeman.
No question, just a comment. Because I do have the privilege of sitting on the audit committee. Tim, I know when we put out a solicitation for our auditing firm, we are usually a 3-year, 5-year. So we usually have the benefit, and correct me if I'm wrong, for a set fee for X years.
That's correct. We did an initial 3-year term with an extension for, I believe, 2 additional 3-year.
So which that also saves us money.
That is correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Moving right along. Finance informational systems.
Moving on to the information systems, you'll see the personnel services, this supports 2 employees. You'll see the impact of the retirement and insurance benefits. Within in the materials and services, you'll actually see a drop in the computer software and maintenance line. We implemented a few things this year where we have some startup costs that you're not going to be seeing rolling into the next year. And a lot of that is some of the camera systems that we have here. We did a significant upgrade in those type of things. So you're not going to see those costs rolling forward. With respect to the current year, we're not planning on implementing any new software packages. So that line would be very much similar to what we've done in the past. With computer hardware, the capital outlay item, during the current year, during 2019-20, we have a few things that we're looking at trying to do. Most of them are compliance related. Windows 7 is no longer going to be supported in the future. In order to remain compliant with CJIS requirements, we have to migrate everything to Windows 10. We've started the process with a lot of the desktop computers, and we're able to do migrations of the existing operating systems. However, for the ruggedized laptops that the officers take into the field, those can't be updated to Windows 10. So we're going to start the process of purchasing new ruggedized laptops. We had started the process of buying 5 a year, I think last year, and we're going to roll that forward. We're going to have to do something with these a lot quicker than we'd originally anticipated. So that's going to be the majority of the computer hardware costs that you'll see for next year. In addition, we're also going to be replacing the police evidence backup system. It's going on about 10 years, and it's also going to be out of warranty in the near future. So those are the 2 real main things that are driving the computer hardware costs. With that, if you have any questions.
Yes, go ahead.
So Tim, you said all the police officers' laptops, the ones in the vehicles and other. And the reason
That
why I
is
say
correct.
The reason why I say that is because I was at court last week, and an officer was trying to pull up one of the cars or whatever he was doing, but it took 15 minutes for him to get Windows 7, to do all of that, load it, and go through the system. And so the judge really wasn't very happy about that. So I'm glad to hear that you're
Correct.
getting that. He will be too.
Yes, anything that involves criminal justice information is going to need to be upgraded. So the court laptop will also be affected, the judge's laptop will be affected, all of the police officers, any computers that they have over in the police department.
Good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Tim, I see on line item 21, it came in about $30,000 less than, the projected is about $30,000 less than budgeted. Did prices come in lower than anticipated, or did we decide not to purchase something that was budgeted?
The biggest piece, actually, that's a good question. We ended up not doing the door system. So we had planned on upgrading the door system. That will be something that rolls into next year. And that was a significant piece of it.
Other questions? Mayor Clark.
So there was, we had talked about doing a muni code where we're going to take our ordinances and so forth and get them codified. Would that be something that would be under legal, under IT, both, none of the above? Or is that on the wish list of, we're working down that list?
That would be on the wish list item. Our preliminary estimates that we got in, it's going to cost about $20,000 to do a codification.
Okay.
Plus additional is ongoing costs for each year. It'll be a couple thousand each year going forward after that.
Okay. And for people watching, it's taking all of the ordinances and regulations that we passed, actually putting it into an organized code. Because you'll see, like, in the City of Salem Revised Codes, SRC, and have a number. So we don't have that at this point. All right,
That is
thank you.
correct.
Other questions? Okay, let's move on to finance utility billing.
With respect to utility billing, you're going to see some interesting numbers within the personnel services. That's simply the result of turnover within the department. This represents 3 employees, so anyone who comes and goes has a fairly significant impact. So that's why you're seeing the administrative support line only at 0.4%. We took someone who was a middle step type of person, and we have someone who's an entry-level starting step 1 type of person. So other than that, the personnel services is remaining the same. When we get into materials and services, we have a couple of things going on. We are going to be implementing a new online bill pay system. The current one that we have has been around for about 5 years, so we're at the point where we're evaluating what we want to do with that system as far as a competitive RFP look at, see what's going on. What we're hoping to do, or what we haven't planned, is to go with the Springbrook version, which is the accounting software that we're currently using. This will give us a better integration, a better customer experience when they log into their account. They'll be able to see much more real-time information. It'll also streamline some of the back-end processes for us. So you'll see a little bit of the contractual services is to reflect the impact of that rolling out. Also within the contractual services is credit card fees, and that is a significant component and continues to grow as a percentage of utilities as more and more customers use credit cards for payment. So with that, if you have any questions.
So I guess I do. So this increase that we're seeing in these contractual services, a lot of that is credit card fees, for something
Correct.
we pay to Visa or MasterCard, or,
That is correct.
wow, it seems to be a lot. It's like,
Yeah, it's
what was the year that we actually added that in, that people could do that, or they've been able to do that forever?
What's the savings on the postage, though, versus that? Because
we do see savings because we're not mailing out statements to a lot of the folks. Credit card fees typically are between 2 to 3% of your revenues. So we do get a special utility rate because as a government entity and a utility, we get a slightly discounted rate for the credit card processing. But as we look through time, though, people are just more and more used to paying with their credit cards. We can see the numbers of checks that we get in the mail dropping significantly. So the best route for most folks is if you can use your own online bill pay system through your bank. That is by far the cheapest method of the city receiving payments, so do that. The second one would be using the city's online bill pay system. So those are the two options that really make the most sense mathematically, economically. But the credit card fees are always going to be with us as more and more people use that as a payment method.
Right.
And we weighed the cost of that when we initiated online bill pay many years ago, purely as a convenience for our customers wanting to step into the current age of being able to take payment. But also, we send a lot less to collections because people are using their credit card to pay their debts to us, and then collections goes after them on the credit card later. So.
And we can't really see the history, but if you look back at 2014, 15, I believe, this department actually had 4 employees. So the technology that we've implemented has really reduced the PERS overhead cost a little bit.
Thought we made a rule on that.
I'm supposed to say that.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's move on to Public Works, non-departmental.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This fund or budget captures costs that are for employees that are paid from multiple funds within the Public Works Department, as well as all the costs associated with our Public Works shop, where all the field staff have workspace and phones and computers. Remains largely unchanged from previous years. We do plan to do a remodel of the kitchen area of that building to create some more space because we've added more people, primarily the 2 new parks employees. And it's quite cozy when everybody's there trying to have lunch at the same time. So reconfigure some things up there. Other than that, it's pretty much as is. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill.
As was, as is.
And you're against
I'm going to
cozy,
find some
huh?
more as we go through these other Public Works funds too, so I'm going to try not to use that one term again.
Cozy, you could eat your neighbor's lunch if it's better than your own, you know, you got that.
Possibly.
Any questions for Public Works? They've got more line items here, so should have some more questions for them. All right, we're being easy on them. Public Works, Civic Center Facilities.
Civic Center Facilities, this fund captures the costs associated with maintaining this complex. Police Department, City Hall, and the community rooms. Well, some of the community room costs, that's in Tracy's other budget, the community center budget. Really not many changes here either. We do have a planned upgrade to our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, or HVAC. We have a kickoff meeting for that this week. That's mainly a controls upgrade that we've worked through a vendor and the Energy Trust of Oregon on, and that's a cost savings long-term. It's an investment on the city of about $70,000, $75,000 on I think it's about $190,000 total project cost, with an estimated payback for the city of about 2.5 years. So it's looks really good. We'd hope to have it in place by now, but various things have delayed it, but the goal is to have it done by the end of June, so we'll start seeing the energy savings starting in July, so.
And what are the energy savings from, I'm sorry?
The heating and air conditioning system, and that they're updating the control system and some of the software and the control logic, and to be honest with you, it's kind of Greek to me, some of the talk they talk. However, when the Energy Trust folks looked over their proposal and got behind funding a large portion of this, I had to believe what they were telling us is true. And so the proof will be in the power and gas bills starting in July to see what kind of savings we see.
Questions? So I have a question, Bill. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
I'm looking at the insurance benefits line. Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the insurance benefits line, and the $25,000 as a percent of total personnel services seems much higher than other budgets, and I was just curious. Like, for example, in the city manager's budget, it's 9.4% of the total, but in this one, it's pushing 25%. And I was just, maybe I'm reading it wrong, or...
Where are you at?
Can you help me with that,
I'm
Tim?
looking at line 20.
Yeah, I see the line. Honestly, I'm not trying to deflect, but Tim prepares this portion of the budgets for me, so I have to defer to him for an answer, because I don't know.
That was skillfully done.
Well played.
Oh, right here, but this number is a percentage of this one.
Oh, this number is a percentage of this one.
The
So
line
that would be
20 as a
correct.
percentage of line 22 seems high, is all I'm asking.
It really depends on which employees are within this fund.
Okay.
So when you're comparing the city manager total compensation to the building facility maintenance person, just the total dollar amount is going to be a lot lower. So as a percentage, you are correct that insurance represents a more significant part of the total compensation for them. So you are correct.
Thank you. Makes sense.
Thank you, Tim.
So I have a question, Mr. Lawyer. So in that wish list, is there anything about like the lighting inside of in this building, changing to LEDs? I know the Morrow Crane building that I work in, they changed all their lighting, and talking to John Morrow, it was a significant savings that they're receiving in energy costs by switching out all these lights from fluorescents to LEDs. And the lighting's actually better in the building than it was before. But is that on that wish list, or?
It's
'Cause I look at the
discussion.
utility bill, it's pretty high.
We actually have the vendor that's doing the heating system upgrade, that project, has looked at the lighting throughout the facility, and we're waiting on a proposal from them through Energy Trust to upgrade everything to LED. I haven't seen their proposal yet. I don't know if they're having a hard time making it pencil out or not. I'm not sure what the holdup is, but we should be seeing some information on that in the next few weeks, so we'll know.
Yeah, it was a quick process in that building. It's probably about the same size as this building, I guess, the Morrow Crane building, but pretty quick process, and made a big difference with my employees being able to see. It's just a whiter light, I guess. is what it
And
is.
I have a kind of a sneaking suspicion that because this building's only 10 years old, the potential savings is less, just because at the time it was built to LEED certification, which was energy efficiency. So I have to believe the lighting fixtures were as energy efficient or nearly as energy efficient as they could be at the time. So the savings the savings might not be as advantageous as maybe they thought about initially. That may be what's holding up or taking longer to get the information back to us. That's just my guess, but I don't know that for sure.
Right. Other questions? Perfect. Ooh, changing categories. Everybody okay? Anybody need a break? I don't want anybody wiggling in their seats. You know, they make it. Some of us are old. Okay, well, why don't we, we'll start off here with Public Works Fund and,
We have one more section here to take a quick look at.
Citywide Administration, okay.
Yeah, page 115.
Then we'll do a break.
This is a department that keeps track of a lot of things that happen at the administrative level that don't necessarily have a home somewhere else. So we have a centralized purchasing for office materials, postage printing, memberships that benefit the entire city, city councilor expenses, liability insurance, and the contingency for the liability plan. The big change here you're going to see is the liability insurance actually going down. During 2018-19, we had to provide for some actual claims that have come in the past few years. So we're anticipating that the base liability will be going down for what we have to pay. However, some of these claims still have some outstanding components to them. So you'll see the liability retro plan contingency going from $50,000 up to $86,000. And that's based off of the most recent estimates that we've gotten from our liability insurance provider. So with that, if you have any questions.
I have a question for the mayor. How often does the city council meet?
We meet twice a month in a regular session, and then we have generally one work session a month Very rarely, we will have two.
Your expenses are fairly low for that many meetings.
Well, it's all kind of built in terms of the facility, and then,
Yeah, the council expenses that you're seeing here, they're mostly to send people to the League of Oregon City Conference. So there's some specific conferences that we provide for. But there's nothing that goes to any individual counselor per se.
Yeah, I will take this opportunity to remind everyone that our city councilors are completely volunteer positions, so there's no compensation for any of them of any sort, other than the joy of being here.
thank you, Chris.
There's obviously no beer.
And I would also say that the cost of televising tonight's meeting, as well as the other meetings that we have of City Council, Planning Commission, Parks, Bike Ped, Traffic Safety, primarily those meetings. I'm trying to remember if there's some others as well. But that is paid through another fund, and that's a very important part of the transparency piece of our work. So that's also not in this line item. But we do go to League of Oregon Cities. The city does send me to the Oregon Mayors Association. They do cover some of my travel expenses, our travel expenses when we represent the city in the in carrying out our responsibilities, if it's a committee assignment or an outside committee that we serve on. When I was on the League of Oregon Cities board, however, the league did cover my expenses for travel through their budget.
All right, any other questions on this fund?
And at this point, oh, go ahead.
Mr. Kohler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Has there ever been any discussion about putting a stipend together for our mayor that goes and represents us in all these different places, different times? There are times that our mayor represents us in ways that truly benefit our city, and I'm wondering if there's been any discussion about putting a monthly stipend together to help her be reimbursed for some of the things that she's never, ever reimbursed for?
Well, I suspect the mayor can probably answer that better, or the former that was there, but as the time I've been on the budget committee, there has not been that. But I believe in Oregon, what are we up to, 3 or 4 paid mayors now? In the whole state of Oregon, there's 241 cities.
241 cities.
So it's a rarity in Oregon that city councils and mayors are paid, but there are some stipends out there for different folks for different work that they do. But anyway, not that we've discussed anyway, like since
I just wondered if that might be something for further discussion, because I think it may be beneficial for the city to do that.
Councilor Rare.
Thank you. You know, I actually researched this, and I was very surprised at how many, and you're right, there were 4. It's on.
There we go. Eat it.
It's on. I can hear
Get out of
coughing,
here.
sneezing. Okay, yeah. I actually did some research on this, and there were 4 at the time paid, but I was surprised how many city councilors, including Springfield and Albany, have stipends, the city. And, you know, I asked about that at one time because, you know, we were doing so much, but especially the mayor. I think it's something we should consider down the road. Not that, you know, we don't want to volunteer, because Kaiser is a volunteer, and I think that's great, but some of those make sense to me, you know. I know even Albany, I was surprised how many. I think there was like 28 cities that had stipends. They weren't a lot. It was like a $200 or something like that, and some were a little more, but they all had something for stipends. So that's something we can look into in the future if somebody's interested.
Because if I may, at this point, what we do is we reimburse for very specific expenses where we can turn in receipts where we are attending a meeting or some sort of event relative to, you know, our duties and responsibilities. And you know, we can also talk to former city councilors, talk about, you know, the additional costs that they incurred in carrying out these duties, and they're not reimbursable under our current, the way we currently handle our finances. Under our long-term staffing, if that is a conversation that we want to get into with some good data to inform that conversation, that might not be unreasonable, because the cost of service, you know, for people losing business, losing billable hours, using up all their vacation time and so forth, can be a barrier for some people even considering running for council. It's too big a hit on their personal budget. And if we want to make city service accessible to people who don't necessarily have the depth of means, that might be a good conversation to have. At this point, I personally am satisfied with being able to turn in my, my expenses as necessary. But if we want to look at it as an equity issue for long-term sustainability and access for people to be able to serve, I think that would be a good conversation to have.
And I don't mean to add to this, but in my real life, I run the Ethics Commission for the state of Oregon, and so this council could vote on future councils getting a stipend, but you might run into some problems about voting on yourself getting that stipend. So that doesn't mean you're not in the position the next time, but there are laws in the state about using your office for financial gain. So if Kaiser ever wants to do that, somebody give me a call. My staff will help take care of that process so that you can do it in compliance with state laws. So any other questions on this fund? All right, let's take.
At this point, we could take a vote on the general services fund.
And then you could take a break.
So does the, do you have the motion?
Yeah, I guess so. I move that the Budget Committee approve the Administrative Services Fund.
Second.
Discussion? Vote? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is that okay with you, Tracy, or do you need a?
Is that all right?
Okay. You just need any opposition. All right. So we need one on,
That's it. Not until we do the
just Administrative Services Fund, so that's public.
Right, when we do the public.
That's correct. As we go through the Public Works funds, you can take a vote after each of the different funds.
Oh, we do.
But you're not talking the Public Works in here, right? Because there's a Public Works underneath.
Correct. Once we move on to the street fund on page 118, that's the point that we can start voting on each of the funds as we go through.
When we get
Yes, I just wanted to make sure we were actually 2B on the schedule.
Under Section B, Public Works Funds, each of those is a separate individual fund that has to be voted on.
Okay, so the meeting's supposed to be over with at 9 o'clock. We're at 7:30 now. If we can take like 10 minutes, come back, and because I'd really like to get out of here by 9 o'clock. That's it.
Testing, 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 testing.
We have to wait till he turns it back on. There we go. Okay, while you guys were at break, this was put on your desk right here. And the Volunteer Coordinating Committee, the month of April, and since we're still in April, is Volunteer Appreciation Month. And so on behalf of the Volunteer Coordinating Committee, we want to thank you guys for your volunteerism and to do these budgets, right? Because we know this isn't nice to sit here for 6 hours, but we do appreciate it. And so instead of a $100,000 bar, it's $1 million, because you guys are worth that. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it. And this is our stipend.
Got a reminder from the folks back running the sound system. For the people on the side, they've figured out some of our problems. Some of the settings were off at the beginning of the night. So we only need to be about 6 to 8 inches away from our microphones for the people at the side tables. The people up at the front, you still have to be a little bit closer, but from what I understand, you guys have been doing well all night. So, and I've confirmed with the people at home that they can hear us. Something happened about 45 minutes ago when we got the settings right, that something popped and they had to turn their volume to half of what it was. So, but we woke them up. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the Public Works Funds, page 118. Is that you, Mr. Lawyer?
That is, Mr. Chair, thank you.
You have the floor.
The street fund revenues come from gas tax that's apportioned to us by the state. As Chris mentioned earlier, the state and the legislature passed some increased gas tax and other transportation-related vehicle registration fees. And so the revenue in the street fund is increasing and will increase, I'm not exactly sure how much, over the next few years. Some highlights from the current fiscal year, some accomplishments that we've made. Project underway right now is the update of the ADA ramps, or the corner ramps along River Road from the south city limits to Shamala Road. Those are being done in preparation to resurface the street this summer. It is a requirement by the Americans with Disability Act that when you repave a street, that's not considered maintenance, and therefore you have to make all of your corner ramps meet the current ADA specifications, including pedestrian signal buttons, pedestrian signal heads, and all those things for the traffic signals as well. So that project's underway right now. Should be done right about the end of June in preparation of paving River Road yet this summer. Another big accomplishment was the completion of the Dearborn Bridge replacement. That happened last September, but that's in this fiscal year. That was a project that I identified many years ago, about 6 years ago, to get done, and after 6 years it's done. Moving into next year, some of the things we're focusing on, one is the resurfacing of River Road, like I just mentioned. We have the Delight Street improvements, that's the pathway I mentioned earlier. Also, the city share of the traffic signal being installed on Kaiser Station Boulevard at the Kaiser Transit Center. We have a share of that project because we own property there. Also, a fiber optic interconnect project on Wheatland on River Road. That's for the traffic signals to replace the copper wire to fiber optic cable to increase operability, primarily for the city of Salem, so because they manage and program and maintain all of our traffic signals. We also have a turn lane on Lock Haven, a right turn lane at 14th, so if you're headed westbound on Lock Haven toward River Road, there'll be a dedicated right turn lane at 14th. That project is going to start right after school gets out. May start actually this fiscal year, but it'll be finished up next year before school starts. That project is something that's identified in our transportation systems plan, as well as the traffic impact analysis done for the Kaiser Station development. Other than that, the street fund is remarkably unchanged. There's some movement within the line items. Primarily, you'll see less in the street improvement line item, more in the resurfacing line item. The other thing I wanted to mention right off the bat, and I forgot, Chris mentioned in his opening, there's a proposal to add a GIS position in Public Works. That's completely funded by Public Works, again, amongst the street fund, stormwater fund, water fund, and parks fund. That position is included in the personal services portion of each of those budgets. It's not a separate line, it's just incorporated into municipal utility worker, I think, for the most part, across those funds. The other thing that you'll see in the street fund and the other public works funds, water, storm, and parks, is the purchase of a new dump truck. That's to replace a 1991 dump truck that has kind of lived its life. And we've gotten many, many good years of service out of it, and it's starting to cost us maintenance money. So the guys have been pushing on me for a couple years to do this, and I've pushed back. We've set some money aside, a total of about $50,000 between some funds saving for that, and so the proposal this year to buy it. Let's see. I think those are the highlights, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So at the Festival Advisory Board last night, the question came up about the ADA ramps, and we just replaced we just did ADA ramps fairly recently in the last 5 years or so, and the question was, and I think I heard you answer it, but did they do something wrong the first time? Are these? I thought it was kind of a rolling plan, but then you said something about the repaving of them. So even though we did them fairly recently, now that we're repaving, we have to do them again?
Well, River Road ramps have not been done recently. We do an annual ADA ramp upgrade, not citywide, but we're working our way through the city.
Okay, so it is a rolling plan.
It's a rolling plan, and
Okay,
those are
that's what I thought.
primarily focused on areas that, one, either don't have them, or we've had a request for them to be installed by residents in the area. That's $25,000. That's all in addition to the project on River Road.
Okay, so so our citizens can rest assured that we're not just doing this again, that they are either different, ADA ramps that are being replaced as part of the plan.
Correct.
That being said, the Americans with Disabilities Act changes their standards fairly often.
That was my other
And
question.
so, and you are not safe harbored. So if you do a project and it triggers an update to the new standards, and then they change their standards again very shortly thereafter, and you have to do, for whatever reason, a resurfacing of that road, it maybe didn't take the first time, maybe you had a base issue, that could trigger the new standards again. So, that's just the nature of that particular act.
And the bottom line is, we're not doing it just for fun.
No, and we rarely do things for fun. We're government.
Kind of a follow-up question to that, especially again coming in the context of the Festival Advisory Board, those ramps are going to be completed by Kaiser Fest, yes?
No, they won't all be completed,
Okay.
but that road will be cleaned up and nothing torn up for Kaiser Fest. The contractor's been directed of that from the very beginning of the project, and my folks are on top of them the next 3 weeks. In fact, I kind of had a little chat with my guys yesterday morning because, or actually it was this morning, because I saw they were tearing out some of the corners. Well, in my mind, the parade was a week from this Saturday, not 2 weeks from this Saturday. And when they reminded me of that this morning, I was less concerned what the contractor was doing. But I was a little upset they were tearing more things up with such a short time frame to go. But bottom line is, they've been directed to have everything taken care of. If there's not concrete poured where the sidewalks have been removed, there'll be asphalt put down or temporary asphalt to make a smooth transition and safe for everybody for the parade.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Gillis.
Mr. Lawyer, I apologize if I missed this in your explanation. On line 71, the debt services, what was that debt issuance for in 2018?
The Dearborn Bridge.
The Dearborn Bridge.
The Dearborn
You did
Bridge.
say that, yeah.
Well, I didn't mention we'd taken debt for that, but that's the project that the debt was for.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I'm not one to go after debt very often, but a bridge that's going to last 75 years kind of makes sense to spread that out over 15 years and issue the debt. So there is one other change, or one change within the budget I need to mention too, and that is on line 66, signage and signal upgrades. I overlooked that I had committed to the city of Salem to spend $25,000 this year to do some traffic signal controller upgrades. They reminded me of that last week when they let me know they would have it done by the end of June. And so in the projected category or column for 2018, 2019, that should be $25,000. And then for proposed 1920, that should also be $25,000, not 20. And that will just make the ending fund balance $30,000 less. So, something I committed to, believe it or not, back in June, and I forgot about it until they reminded me last week, so.
So that ending fund balance at 49.7 is going to be down to 19.7, is that right?
No, the ending fund balance should be from 324 down that 30, so 294, is that if I do my math right?
Okay.
That's line 84 on page 120.
So I'm sorry, I have a question too, but the dump truck, what line is that?
Dump truck is on line 61.
And so is this 19.7, is that just part of the cost? Is it spread out other funds?
Yes, it is. That's part of the cost of a dump truck and also in the street fund, part of a cost of a new pickup too. That's shared amongst all the three main, well, the dump truck is across 4 funds. The pickup is across 3 funds, water, streets, and stormwater.
So what is the total cost of the dump truck?
The dump truck total cost is about, we estimated $180,000, and I hope it comes in less than that. I think it will. That was an initial estimate, and since I put this together, we've had some other correspondence, and the manufacturers indicate that they think that number's high. It's probably closer to 150, but we won't know till we get it out. And frustratingly enough, 3 manufacturers have told us it's probably at least 10 months, if not 14 months out from the date you order.
Yeah.
So we might not even see it this fiscal year, or this next fiscal year. We won't pay for it till we see it, of course, but not knowing what the delivery date is, I just put it in next year's budget. So.
Thank you. Other questions on this fund?
So it's going to be as amended.
So we need a motion on this fund, sir?
That is correct.
As amended?
Yes, please.
Mr. Gillis?
I make a motion to approve this budget as amended.
Second.
So Mr. Gillis makes a motion that the street fund as amended be approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
You okay, Tracy? All those opposed? None. Motion passes. Okay, let's go to the street lighting district, or districts.
Thank you, Chairman.
Plural.
The city of Kaiser has over 200 street lighting districts, and a street lighting district is basically a neighborhood that has street lights in it that's a discrete area. It typically forms when the new development goes into that area. The city fronts the money for the electricity and the installation of the streetlights, and then assesses to the property owners on their property tax statements a request for reimbursement. Going forward, we anticipate 1 to 2 additional street lighting districts being formed next year, although we don't really have anything in mind at this point, so it's really going to depend upon development. With respect to electricity costs, it's actually been flat. During the 2016-17 and 17-18, we did a fair number of projects to make the lighting more efficient, and that's really been able to keep the costs down. With respect to the specific assessments to property owners, just about all of them are going to be going down this year. So they'll be seeing a little bit of relief on their property tax statements. And with that, if you have any questions.
Parsons.
Tim, does all the neighborhoods that have streetlights pay that, or only the newer ones within the last 20 years or whatever? I mean, do we have street lightings in every single neighborhood that's lit up or no?
I do believe that every neighborhood that has lights has a street lighting district. There's a few areas of street lights along like the River Road and stuff that the city is responsible for.
Okay.
But I do believe all the neighborhoods are paying their assessment.
Okay, fantastic. How much fun pay their fair share?
Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last year, it seems to me that there were about 3 new lighting districts that came before council for us to approve. Is that correct? And you say there are 1 to 2 for projected for this year?
Correct. That sounds about right.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Clark.
And for the older neighborhoods, though, that don't currently have street lights and want to form a street lighting district, there is a process that they can engage in to get streetlights and form a district. It's not just new developments that can have streetlights, is that correct?
That is correct. There is a formal process, and they could contact the city, and we could get that going for them. A lot of the assessments that you see are anywhere between $40 and $100 for each house, each property owner. So and that would be on an annual basis. So it's fairly reasonably priced.
Thank you.
Other questions? So I had a question. I thought, maybe I was wrong, but does PGE own some of these street lights that are out there? Because I know they upgraded a bunch to LED lights, and wasn't there some kind of where we gave them ownership of the street light or something like that?
There are several different programs, and I think I'll have to turn it over to Bill to expand on them. I just do the numbers.
The majority of the streetlight districts in PGE's service area are what's called an Option A district. Those are PGE owned, PGE maintained, okay? Right. There was a period of time where they offered an Option B, which was city owned, PGE maintained. Those were less cost to the property owners on an annual basis, more risk to the city because we'd be responsible to replace light poles when they got hit as opposed to PGE doing it. PGE has done away with that option when they went to LED lighting, changed their rate structure, and upgraded all of their lights in Kaiser to LED lighting. Option B went away. So there's a period of about 10 or maybe 15 years where some the newer subdivisions in that time frame were Option B districts, everything else is Option A. Same electric service area, they don't have options, they just have streetlight charges. And they're by the pole and by the wattage of the light, and that's assessed to the city and then reimbursed through the districts.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, we'll entertain a motion on this fund. Mr. Gillis.
I make a motion to approve the street lighting district fund as written.
Mr. Gillis has made a motion to approve the street lighting district's fund as written. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Transportation improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Transportation Improvement Fund is remarkably unchanged year to year, other than just the anticipation of maybe collecting some more revenue for this fund. That revenue comes from systems development fees paid by development, whether it be single-family, multifamily, or commercial, goes into this fund to build capacity-increasing projects throughout the transportation system. The main one that we're kind of on hold with, well, not kind of on hold, we're on hold with, is an improvement to the on-ramp at exit 260. That's a project that the city has a commitment to help fund, but it's up to the Oregon Department of Transportation, or ODOT, to initiate the project. So we're just kind of sitting back waiting for them to initiate it, and when the time comes, we'll contribute our share. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? So I have one. Are you just being a little conservative again on your system development fees?
As far as what we expect to collect?
Well, you projected at 90 this year, but you went back down to 33.6 from 33,000. So
yeah, we had some additional development come in this year that we didn't anticipate, and I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, that paid transportation fees that we just didn't expect to see in this current year. So we kind of based it on next year on what we expect to see. We get surprised something develops we're not planning for, that we'll see an increase next year, this next year too.
Okay. Any questions? Councilor Parsons?
Thank you, sir. Chair, I move that I move that the Budget Committee approve the off-site Transportation Improvement Fund, sorry.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that Transportation Improvement Fund be accepted as written. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Passes. Okay, off-site transportation.
Thank you. The Off-Site Transportation Improvement Fund is significantly different proposed next year than previous years. That's because the funds available in that fund will help pay for the project at Lock Haven and 14th. As I mentioned earlier, that project is identified in the traffic impact analysis, for the Kaiser Station development, and that project was a requirement of that traffic impact analysis. We've collected fees over the years from development in Kaiser Station to help pay for that project. Now that we're building that project, these funds will be used to help pay for that. And so by projection at the end of this next fiscal year, the balance will be virtually zero. And we'll just keep collecting and put it toward the next project we're going to build. So that's the highlights, lowlights, and all the lights for that fund.
I guess I'm missing this. Where's the zero? Oh, I see.
Line 15.
69.5 to begin with. I see. And you're going to spend that amount. I got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
That's how you get
You need to put a big fat zero for me at the end.
Yeah.
Get it.
At the
So.
bottom.
Any other not so smart questions to ask? On the record? Okay. Entertain a motion. Mr. Gillis?
I move to approve the Off-Site Transportation Improvement Fund as written.
Second?
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that the off-site transportation improvement fund be approved as written. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Stormwater. Now we'll get big.
Okay, the stormwater fund that was previously mentioned does include a rate increase of 55 cents per equivalent service unit, or ESU. And one ESU is charged for every single-family home, and then the rate of 3,000 square feet of impervious area is assessed for commercial and multifamily projects. 3,000 square feet of impervious area equals one ESU. The street fund pays its portion for its ESUs and its impervious area, and you'll see, we've seen that, you'll see that as a transfer into the storm fund from the street fund. That's a pretty good chunk of money, but as this utility was put together, it was determined that was the fairest way for the city and the streets to participate in the utility, as opposed to spreading that cost against the residents and businesses of the city. So that's been in place since the utility was formed. Really, the only other changes I mentioned previously, the GIS position, that's included in this fund as well. A portion of the dump truck that I mentioned with the street fund is included, as well as a portion of a pickup. And those are on line 62. And then we plan next year to do a fairly significant realignment of a storm drain line that currently goes under two houses down on Shoreline and Cummings. So we're going to reroute that line out into the street. It's about 17 feet deep, and I believe it's a 24-inch pipe, so it's a fairly major realignment project. Anytime you get that deep, it's expensive and a bit dangerous. So that's identified for next year. Other than that, it's pretty much business as usual. We are working on implementing all the requirements of our recently obtained National Pollutant Discharge Elimination Systems, which is a mouthful. NPDES Phase 2 permit for our stormwater system that we've worked for almost 9 years now to get our permit. We finally received that permit in March, and we now know what requirements we're faced with. For sure, to meet the requirements of that permit, we've been implementing some things as we've been going along, anticipating what the permit was going to require us to do. So we're a little ahead of the game, but now we have our marching orders, we know what we have to do, and we're working hard to meet those requirements. So.
Questions? Mayor Clark?
So that was said kind of like, yeah, we got this permit and so forth. This is a banner thing. You should take that permit and frame it. It's a trophy to be able to have gone through this process. It is so technical. And Elizabeth and her staff have been so diligent in really digging into all the details necessary to qualify for this permit. This is no small feat, folks, to get this permit and already have things in motion. So just want to take some time to really shout out that this is the level of excellence of service that is being provided from this city, not only with requirements from the federal government, but also providing higher quality in terms of our water quality and reduced flooding in our streets and just overall service to the community. So this is a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
Exclamation point.
Thank you, and I guess I do take it a little bit for granted because we've been working on it for so long. It's almost anticlimactic for me to actually have the permit in hand. But I thank you for that. I appreciate that, and I'll share that with the staff.
Please do. Councilor Reed.
Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I wanted to put another exclamation mark on what Kathy had said because I'm on the Stormwater Advisory Committee, and of all the committees that I am involved with, that one is the most baffling to me as far as the expertise that it requires. And just to watch Elizabeth and her staff in action as far as, not only figuring things out, but also kind of being on the cutting edge as far as building relationships with the state Department of Energy Quality. And, just the proactive work that she's been doing in that. And so, again, another exclamation mark on that. And I would also like to ask, though, so this budget, this reflect pretty much all of these, whatever new requirements that we have because of the permit have been anticipated and absorbed into these line items, and we're not adding anything in particular?
Yes, they have been incorporated, and we are adding something in particular. That's the GIS position.
Yeah.
That has really increased the demand for that type of programming, and that system has increased citywide, driven primarily by the stormwater utility and the storm fund, and the work they have done and the requirements through the permit that we have to do. And so the approach was to implement a GIS position department-wide so we can start taking more advantage in our other areas, water, streets, parks, as well as stormwater, and taking that duties from the current stormwater staff will then give them the additional time to focus on the additional requirements in the permit.
Other questions? Can you remind everybody, or inform me anyway, what GIS stands for?
Geographic Information Systems.
Thank you.
You bet.
Can learn something each day. Google Maps, that was it for. Okay, any other questions on this fund?
In the surveying world and that world, GIS, they say it stands for Get It Surveyed. But in the applicable world, it's Geographical Information Systems. Google Maps, for instance, is a big GIS system.
Okay.
So you weren't wrong. Not wrong.
He's rarely wrong. Okay. We'll entertain a motion on the stormwater fund. Mr. Gillis?
I make a motion to approve the stormwater fund as written.
Second.
There we go. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. The stormwater fund will be approved as written. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Sewer fund.
Thank you, Chairman. Kaiser is part of a regional sewer system that is managed by the City of Salem. So the City of Salem does all the work, and they tell us how much to bill our customers, and then we remit that money back to them. Based off of the last go-around with the sewer task force, the increase for sewer rates is about 2%, which is significantly lower than it has been for many, many years. So this is the lowest increase that we've seen probably since I've been around, and I think that's about 10 years now. So we're doing well. The increase is really to support the ongoing capital investment into the sewer infrastructure. So with that, if you have any questions.
Councilor Herrera.
Tell me about the sewer task force, is that Kaiser or is?
It's managed by the city of Salem. They put it all together. And every 2 years, they get people from all the different representative cities together. So the city of Turner is part of it. They also have some folks from West Salem. Kaiser, I was part of it the last go around. And we sit around and they present their cost of service model to us. And then they show us any of the changes that they're expecting into the future. So.
Thank you.
And our previous representative to the task force, I believe, was Councilor Bruce Anderson. I think he got to sit through that last go-round, if I remember from his report. And Councilor Dan Kohler is our current representative to go to the next go-round that comes up.
Good luck.
He looks excited.
Yeah. It's a thrill a minute.
They do provide lunch, so it's worth going to.
And you know you always get out of it what you put into it.
And on that note, is there any other questions that we have on this? Okay, let's entertain a motion on the sewer fund. Councilor Parsons?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the stormwater fund.
Sorry,
I'm sorry, sewer fund. Why do I keep saying that? Sewer fund.
As written.
As written. I'm not doing that anymore.
Somebody say two.
Yeah, I did.
Second, yeah, Kim.
Kim did.
Thank you. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that the sewer fund be approved as written. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
I will say that in the sewer business, you don't get out of it what you put into it. You get
So-
relatively clean water and heavy metals laden fertilizer, so.
So we have now
And energy.
a sewer reserve fund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Sewer Reserve Fund is set up to pay for basically sanitary sewer trunk lines that are necessary in the city. Most of those have been built to this date. That fund, the revenue for that fund, comes from fees paid by properties that need sewer service that were not part of the original sewer district, okay? Most of those properties have connected. There's very few left in the city to connect. There's a few up north. I think the biggest chunks are out off Windsor Island Road, actually north of Lock Haven. There's some properties out there. We don't have any identified plans to build or help fund any trunk lines at this time, but in the next fiscal year, if somebody comes along to develop some property in an area that needs a trunk line, we'll have these funds available to help pay for that. We typically don't build those ourselves. We just help fund developer projects. And that's kind of the way we're approaching the main line we have to build yet's on Windsor Island Road. And so until somebody comes along to develop or has a need for sewer service, there's really no need to build a line that won't have any use on it. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Mr. Gillis?
Mr. Lawyer, the assumption there around note 5 for the 4.5 acres of development, is that just based off of the assumed growth
Yes.
for development? Oh.
Just a educated guess that we might see 4.5 acres develop this next fiscal year, yes.
Okay.
Other questions? Let's entertain a motion. Mr. Gillis?
I make a motion to approve the sewer reserve fund as written.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the sewer reserve fund be approved as written? Or did you say amended?
Written.
As written.
No, right.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Water.
Okay, the water fund revenues come from utility fees, user fees. As was mentioned earlier, this does include a 4% rate increase in the water fund for this next year. Really unremarkable changes from next year from this year. I'm trying to find different terms as that for each one of these, and there's a lot in a row, so I hope I'm doing okay. Really, there's just not a lot to talk about in this fund. It's pretty much business as usual. In the current year, we've had a little additional costs in some pump maintenance. We had a well, a Cherry Avenue well, we scheduled to pull the pump and go through it. We actually had to do a little more well rehabilitation than we planned on. Had to spend a little more than we'd planned on there. That's not a large surprise. We don't always budget for that level of well rehabilitation because we don't typically need to. That one needed it. This fund does have its share of the dump truck and the pickup I talked about earlier, its share of the GIS position I talked about earlier. Really, other than that, it's pretty much business as usual.
Councilor Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bill, the water sales, is that the money we get when we sell our water to, like, the city of Salem, when they have bad water and we give them good water?
Yes, that's where the revenue goes. That's where the revenue from all the water sales citywide goes. But when we do sell water to Salem, that's where it shows up. Yes.
It shows up in that. So, but it's not a separate line item. Then?
No, it's not a separate line item. It's just grouped into that. And I think, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, that was about a $30,000 bill to Salem. So that was an increased revenue that we didn't anticipate.
Okay. Thank you.
That was for about a week. We only sold them water for about a week. So.
Other questions? Mr. Blair.
Mr. Blair, line item 7, the diesel fuel sales, can you explain what that item entails and why that was high?
Certainly.
Why it's projected to be high?
Certainly. The diesel fuel sales is primarily sales to the fire district. We have a 1,000-gallon tank on our site that we share with them, a pump system that we pay monthly to have filled, or actually weekly to have filled, and then every quarter they reimburse us based on their actual use. That also includes sales to the stormwater fund, street fund, and the parks fund within the city. We all have our own keys. Those divisions have their own key, so we track how much fuel they use, and each quarter those funds reimburse the water fund for the initial cost. And of course, you know, with diesel prices and fuel prices being up and down all around on any given day, we do the best job we can to estimate where they'll be. So.
Other questions? Mr. Gillis.
Mr. Lawyer, did you say that the sale of water to Salem for the water quality issue was 30,000-ish unexpected? Yes. Was that in 18-19? Because the budget and projected are the same for that line.
I think that revenue came in 17-18. That was June, if I remember right, the date was June of 18. So it hit last fiscal year's revenue. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Good question, though, because we don't usually project our revenues that far off. I mean, we wouldn't be $30,000 off is what I'm saying, so good question.
Other questions or comments? So I'm just going to go ahead and make my one that I always do, because this may be the last time I'm on the Budget Committee, so the last time you have to hear me whine about this. But the increases that we need in water, I would really like to see instead of just that 4% straight across the board, because multifamily and businesses actually pay less than residents do. And I know it's not a lot of money, but eventually over time, if we just give 4% to each one of the funds, that gap keeps getting bigger and bigger with each raise. And so if we need an additional $100,000 or $200,000, find an equitable way that all three of those types of users pay the same amount. And so whether that makes the residents pay, 3.5% and the other folks pay a little bit more than they're paying now. And like I say, I know it's not a lot, but I do know that if we don't do something like that, the gap keeps getting bigger and bigger. And so I'll just say that. I know it's not a lot of money, but
Understand.
I feel good about saying my piece.
Understand, and I appreciate your comments. Tim and I actually talked about that recently, and we've talked about this previously, both I think at the Long Range Planning Task Force and last year during these meetings. The water fund has debt that's paid off, I believe, in 2021 or next year, next fiscal, not next fiscal year, but in my mind, it's next fiscal year. It's actually 2 years away. And once that debt's paid off, we want to do a rate study update, because it's been about 20 years, and incorporate that very discussion in that rate study update. Look at the system overall and figure out, what our rates need to do moving into the future. And we can certainly make that part of that conversation.
All right. Okay. Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lawyer, how do our city rates compare to other cities close around us?
Water rates, low, extremely low. I haven't looked at water rates specifically myself for a while, but we're lower than anybody I'm aware of in the area. And the primary reason for that is, and I want to really point this out, we're very fortunate we don't have to treat our water. Okay, we don't have a water treatment plant. Water treatment plants are expensive, not just to operate, but they take a lot of staff, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. People are expensive. We're fortunate. We don't have to treat our water. We pump it out of the ground, we add a little fluoride, we send it to the houses and the businesses. And so because of that, we can have low rates, because we don't have to spend the money to treat the water.
And then a follow-up on that. Isn't our water quality actually much better than the cities around us also?
I will say it's much different. I don't want to say it's better. It's different. We're a groundwater source, and the groundwater is clean enough. We don't have to do anything to it. We don't have to disinfect it. We don't have to treat it for anything, because it's clean coming out of the ground. Most other cities in our region use surface water, river water, creek water. You have to treat surface water. It has bugs in it, and you have to kill the bugs before people can drink it. Groundwater, in our case, we don't have to do that. So I can't say it's better. I personally think it's better. I like groundwater. There are those in the community that hate groundwater. They don't like the taste of it. They don't like the smell of it. I like groundwater. So better's not necessarily what I would describe it as. It's just different, and we're fortunate that we have a source we don't have to treat.
Groundwater has some inherent disadvantages, if you can look at them that way, is because it's traveling through the ground, it picks up minerals and whatnot that end up in the water. So groundwater tends to be harder water, whereas surface water tends to be softer water. Sometimes you have to treat it at the user end, like with a water softener, et cetera, and that'll take out most of the particulates and issues that you can see with groundwater. But in terms of cleanliness, it's top-notch. So.
And I've long been a proponent of why add something to the water if you don't have to. So we don't.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Gillis.
I move to approve the water fund as written.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the water fund be approved as written. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Water Facility Replacement Fund.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. This Water Facility Replacement Fund is the project fund for the water system. Revenues from this fund come from user fees or rates, as well as systems development fees collected from new connections to the system. Those rates are based on meter size. In the current year, we were planning to update the McNary pump station to an automatic start on the backup or the auxiliary engine drive. Due to complications in finding available equipment and a lot of other frustrating things, we're not going to get that done this fiscal year, and so that's going to be moved into next year, and that's going to change line item 18. The projected will change from $150,000 to $100,000, and proposed for next year will be $75,000. That's going to reduce the ending fund balance by $25,000 ultimately at the end of next fiscal year, which can easily be absorbed in this fund. A couple of the other things we're doing yet to finish yet this fiscal year is upgrading some components of our telemetry system to replace some things that are no longer supported before they fail. Thankfully, we haven't had anything fail yet. In fact, the vendors on site today working on finishing up that project. And we're also upsizing a couple fuel tanks at a couple of our wells, diesel fuel tanks, so they'll have longer run time in a long duration power outage. I think one of the tanks is 100 gallons and the other one's 150. We're putting in 1,000-gallon tanks. Those are supposed to be delivered 1st of June, so they'll be all done and set in place by the end of this year. Looking at next year, we'll do the McNary project, finish that like I just mentioned, and then also get back on our water main replacement program with $400,000. I know we're planning on doing Cummings Lane west of Shoreline, because that project was designed and bid. We had to pull it back because costs were higher than we anticipated. So that's sitting on the shelf ready to go, and we'll add some other streets. I'm not sure which ones yet. Put that project together to be built next fiscal year.
Diesel tanks.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any problem with that diesel just sitting there for that long? It's basically just used when there's a power outage?
There is a problem if it sets too long, and what we do is we come in and recycle it. We'll have it pumped out of those tanks and brought to the tank at the shop, and then used, and then we'll refill the tanks at the pump station. But we only have to do that about every 5 years. Diesel's pretty darn stable in those tanks. It doesn't pick up moisture, and it doesn't. No. So we're fortunate. We keep an eye on it, good eye on it, and we have had to recycle the fuel from one site to another to use it up. And it's going to be more of a problem with a 1,000-gallon tank, no question about it, because we're not going to be able to cycle through it just on regular routine maintenance and operation of those pumps or those motors to make sure they run. But that's something we're willing and we will do. We have to do so. And our diesel vendor does it for a very reasonable cost, believe it or not. They don't charge us much to come out and suck it out of one tank and bring it back to the other one. So.
I don't have my thing on. And so you haven't had any issues of theft of those tanks?
No. No, they're all in fenced areas, and they're locked up and secured as well as we can. So to date, we haven't had any problems.
Great. Other questions? Entertain a motion?
I make a motion to approve the water facility replacement fund as written.
As amended, pardon me, as amended.
As amended, excuse me.
Yes, he amended, sorry, line 18.
Line 18, correct.
Yeah. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the water facilitation or facility replacement fund as amended on line 18. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Park Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an exciting fund for me. I just almost jumping up and down. It's so exciting because we're able to do things
We have
with
time,
this.
feel free.
We're able to do things in the park system that I never actually dreamed we were going to be able to do. I want to highlight some of those things in the last 18 months. We've resurfaced or added pathways in 7 of the parks system-wide. We've hired 2 new full staff members. We've purchased 2 service vehicles and 1 service vehicle and 2 pickups, 2 72-inch zero-turn mowers, 2 enclosed trailers for hauling the equipment around to the parks to do the services. Replaced the play structure at Meadows Park, including rubberized fall protection surfacing, sports courts at Clagger Creek Park and Northview Park, including fences around them, new basketball hoops. Striping will be done on those courts here very soon now that the concrete's cured and the weather's back to good. And increased service levels system-wide. Darn proud of what we've done in 18 months. Moving forward, we are planning to update and rehabilitate the skate park, phase 2. Phase 1 of that was to basically grind some of the surfaces and make them smooth again. Phase 2 includes rebuilding of the 2 bowls, making them more universally usable, I will say. We worked with a skate park design company to come up with a design. There's actually a meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock to get public input on that proposed design. Hopefully we'll get a lot of users of the park there to tell us what they think. Planning on having that project start probably in September because we don't want to take it out of service during the peak use, and the vendors that we've talked to that are likely to bid the project are already booked until then anyway, so it just kind of works together. We also have plans to, geez, I gotta get my mind back. I'm stuck on what we've done. I gotta get back to where we're going. We've got the bathrooms at Kaiser Rapids. That was funded partially through the fees and STCs and a grant program, or through the Oregon State Parks. We want to do the skate park, replace the tennis courts at Willamette Manor Park this year. That's something that's been on the to-do list for a while. We want to replace another one of the pickup, and also the parks has its share of the dump truck. We're also increasing the parks grant program by $5,000 per request by the Parks Board. That primarily is focused on hopefully encouraging some more youth involvement, projects that can be materially funded on the front end instead of a reimbursement program. Parks Board's still working on the details of how that's going to work. Yeah, I guess that's the high points of the Parks Fund, and it's exciting.
And the replacement of a swing at Northview.
Yes, replacement of swing at Northview, yes, thank you. I did not mention that. See, we're doing so much, I can't keep track of it all.
Told you I had time to jump around. Jumping.
So I just want to make sure that I get these titles right. So the park services fees on line 9, that's the one that's on the water and sewer bills, right?
Correct.
Okay, and the general fund on 23 is general fund support?
Correct.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure, when we're doing these fees, we talked a lot about not reducing general fund support and offsetting dollars, and this shows that didn't happen, so I appreciate that.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last city council meeting, the Parks Foundation contributed announced a contribution of $20,000 toward a shade facility for the Big Toy. Is that for this fiscal year? Or I know that we talked about the fact that this is not happening this year, but I just wanted to know, as a donation, where that's going to show up.
Good question. And I'm glad you asked that question, because that reminds me of something else that I had my arm over here. Yes, those funds show up coming in this year in the grant line item, park donations, the $33,300. That includes the Parks Foundation donation of $25,500. Okay? And I have a note on the other balance of that. That comes from Kaiser Little League. The Kaiser Little League group approached the city about splitting the cost of an additional mower for the Kaiser Little League complex, one that picks up grass to be used on their primarily infields, but some of the outfields up there at the complex too. The mower that they have, that the city purchased a few years ago for the complex, doesn't pick up grass, and it really lends itself for a better baseball field if the grass can be picked up. So we split the cost with them on that, and that donation line includes their contribution to that mower. So, the shade sales, I hope to have that done this fiscal year. That's not going to happen. For various reasons, not the least of which is the design for the support columns for those shade sales. One, took longer than I anticipated, and two, are significantly more massive than I ever dreamed. For instance, one of the posts, the columns I will call it, is about 13.5 feet tall out of the ground. Well, it needs to be in a hole that's 12 feet deep, 3 feet diameter, filled with concrete. That's just one. And there's about total, I think there's 16 post columns through it for the entire project. All of that to be said, I'm still moving forward. The goal now is to have that built in September. We'll have to close the Big Toy for a period of time while those columns are installed. And so we'll close it right after Labor Day at this point. Hopefully that works with the vendor schedule, and then get that built. Which leads me to a change in the budget you have in front of you. That's on line 62. The projected 18-19 column says 472,100. That should be changed to 420,100. And proposed 19-20 should change from $400,000 even to $452,000. It's really a neutral adjustment, it's just a timing thing. I had planned to have that shade sale, and I estimated at that time $52,000 done this fiscal year. I know now that's not gonna happen, so I just moved it into next year. And at this point, I will just tell the committee that I pretty much know the project's not gonna cost $52,000. It's probably gonna be over $100,000, based on the footing prices, but I still committed to get it done. I'm gonna bid it in schedules so that we can at least do part of it, unless there's a huge savings by having somebody come back to do the second part, then we'll figure out how to do it all at once, so.
Councilor Parsons.
Mr. Lawyer, those columns, are they going inside the park? We're going to drill into the rubberized surface and all the way down?
In some places, yes. In some places, they'll be outside. We'll have to cut the rubber,
How big are they in diameter?
3 foot,
Wow.
and we've,
'Cause I'm going to tell you right now, kids are running into the equipment. You put more poles in there, they're going to knock themselves out.
that's part of the reason that the project has, the cost has increased, because we were very selective about where you could put a post.
Yeah, I
Okay?
hope so.
Yeah. The designer that came out, first design, said, you can't put a post in the middle of that running area. I'm sorry, you've got to move that post. So all the posts that are inside the playground are very close to existing structures, okay? Which makes it safer for the kids and the users of the big toy, but makes it a whole lot more expensive to put them in.
Okay.
So,
Well, they need the shade, but I just want to make sure you weren't putting them in the middle of the...
No.
Because the kids play tag and they can watch where they're going.
I'd like to, because it'd be easy.
Are they metal?
It'd be a
Are they
lot
gonna
less
knock themselves
expensive
out
to
if
have
they
it
run into
installed and built, but there's just, no, we won't do that. And then.
Are
well,
they metal?
Oh, yeah, they're epoxy coated steel,
Oh.
or actually powder coated steel.
Okay.
So, and they're, I think they're 8-inch, the big ones are 8-inch diameter and the small ones are 6-inch diameter. So, I had a gal come down and meet me and Robert out there, so she could see the site firsthand and understand the dynamics of why what she was proposing post placement wouldn't work. And once she got there, she brought her kids with her too, it was really neat. They were running around and she very quickly understood why what she thought would work didn't work, so.
Thank you for clarifying.
You bet.
Safety first.
Councilor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. So Bill, you and I have had this conversation, I think Councilor Parsons was in on it too, just about trash, especially at Kaiser, at the Big Toy. And I know with the increased park staff, and I'm guessing some of our contract help that we get for the summer, we're going to adjust maybe schedule. So or I know we had talked about, I think, larger trash cans, and I'm sure not just at the Big Toy, probably other parks as well, especially with some of the newer play structures that we have at some of our parks. So can
Yes.
you just kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we are planning, in fact, it's funny you asked that, Robert, I just talked about that Monday. We saw a huge increase in use over the weekend. Weather was nice, and things just got trashed, literally, trash everywhere, just system-wide, really bad at Kaiser Rapids. And so Robert had planned to bring a temporary on and have them work weekends for that very reason, so they can be doing patrols. He wasn't going to start that until maybe mid-May, 1st of June. I think we're going to start that right away. Unfortunately, the person he had lined up to start Monday couldn't make it because they hurt themselves over the weekend. And so our agency is looking for another person.
My wife retired,
Frustrations
she
of
took a
staffing.
crash. She's looking for volunteer opportunities.
And so you see in this proposed budget an increase in the temporary labor line item, and that's the reason for that increase, so we can add more people and put on a weekend person that's here. Oh, we've had somebody on the weekends primarily, well, it's on the weekends, but their focus has been the splash fountain and reservations. Well, we're going to add another person that can be doing parks-related things system-wide, maybe focus some more attention at Kaiser Rapids as necessary, but also go to other parks and make sure garbage is picked up all weekend.
Perfect,
So-
thank you.
Appreciate that, yeah.
Did you have a question, Mr. Allen? Any other questions? Mr. Gillis.
I make a motion to approve the Park Services Fund as amended.
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the park Services Fund, is that right? Park Services Fund, as amended. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Park improvements, it looks like our friendly neighborhood, Mr. Wood, brought us a new sheet of paper.
Yes, Tim did bring you a new piece of paper, and that's primarily because I erred when I put the original one together.
Okay.
The change is just simply that on line 7, the original projection was to receive no grant funds in the current fiscal year. We would receive them next year. Well, that's wrong. We're going to get those this year, before the end of June. That is the grant funding that we received from Oregon Parks and Recreation for improvements at Kaiser Rapids Park. That's the pathways that went from Shamala Road south down to the loop pathway and tied into Tate Avenue, and also took a pathway over to the Big Toy location. Help fund the servicing, rubberized servicing at the Big Toy, and help fund the new permanent bathrooms. I really didn't think they would get the money to us before the end of June, but it looks like, without question, we will have it by the end of June, so that's the change.
Perfect. Other questions? Councilor Freeman.
So interest is really going to increase from 1,000 to 10,000? I just want to make, that's on line 9.
That is correct. Last year's budget, I think we just missed a 0, to be honest.
Okay.
So I'm glad that you brought it up, because interest rates are so exciting right now. We invest all of our money at the Oregon State Treasury, and we're actually getting 2.75% now.
What?
And it's amazing. 5 years ago, we were getting about 0.5%. So, I mean, it's every month when I open the Oregon State Treasury statement, it's just amazing. It really is.
Thank
So,
you.
sorry.
Well, that side of the room seems entertained on that. So, other questions?
The one thing I should mention in the Park Improvement Fund, just so, because I've done it with all the other funds, the revenue for that fund comes from systems development fees collected through single-family and multifamily developments. No commercial does not pay parks fees, just residential. So that's where those funds come from.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll entertain a motion. Mr. Gillis?
I make a motion to approve the Park Improvement Fund as written.
Second?
Did you amend that?
This is the revised, so would that be up to you as amended?
Oh, is that amended because you gave us a new one?
Revised.
As revised.
Or re-
I would
As
just say as
handed to me
revised.
by Bill.
As revised, is that what you
How
said?
about that?
Correct.
As revised, JD, as revised.
Just to be clear, the motion is to approve the Park Improvement Fund as revised by the, on page 138, the revised edition, 430. Okay, any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the Park Improvement Fund, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Everybody be here on time, 6 o'clock on Thursday.
We do have a few more minutes, so if we want to look at a few more funds, we can, or we can adjourn. If we do look at more funds, my recommendation is we would do reverse skate and start with the last funds, like the Kaiser Station LID, housing rehab, energy efficiency funds. But that's really your choice if you want to leave now or...
Well, we have 11 minutes, and, you know, I'm just one vote on here, but I think that we can adjourn now and we can finish this on Thursday, and we'll be on time.
Fair enough.
I'll try to, well, it's something like that.
Statistically insignificant change.
Remarkably similar.
Unchanged.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you Thursday night.
We're adjourned.